Status check and proceed with terminal count. First stage system. Propulsion.
Go.
Hydraulic.
Go.
Locks.
Go.
LH2.
Go.
Vehicle system engine.
Go.
Anomaly chief.
Go.
Range coordinator.
Clear to proceed.
Launch director.
You have permission to launch.
We have liftoff of the United Launch Alliance.
Liftoff of the United Launch Alliance Delta IV rocket.
And we have good indication of separation.
Hello and welcome back to Space Matters. Today we feature author Daniel Fox. He's an entrepreneur, an artist, a philosopher, a photographer, and he likes to be known as a solo wilderness explorer. And after today, you will see why I've also added the description of poet. His book, Feel the Wild, is highly recommended, and I hope that you enjoy the conversation today.
Do you have the right stuff? Then blast off to Janet's Planet Virtual Astronaut Academy. Learn from real astronauts, real pilots, real space experts, and real engineers. Welcome to Janet's Planet, where we're traveling at the speed of thought.
Mr. Daniel Fox. Hi, Daniel.
Really happy to be here.
I'm really glad to have you here. Thank you for joining us today. So tell us a little bit about what you do.
So for the past 10 years, I've been doing solo wilderness expeditions. I go out by myself for 2-3 weeks into the wilderness. And I write and photograph, and I connect with these big insights that nature has to offer to us. And then I bring them back to the public and craft them into these stories that basically parallels the human journey to nature. Nature is this kind of world of teachings and lessons and dynamics and values. And once we start to recognize them, then we can apply them to our own lives and find a certain comfort in our own journey. And now I find myself really connected to space, because space is just another extension of nature. The planet Earth is nature. We are part of nature. And now we're about to take life into space, which is just another room. You know, nature continues into this universe. So for me, it's just this thread that keeps expanding, and it is so exciting and inspiring.
So you refer to yourself as an ape. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I've always had trouble kind of categorizing me to one single thing. So even I think it was a couple of years ago, we were driving back from some friends in Napa with my wife. And my friend had trouble introducing me to another person. And finally, we started to put all the different titles that I had. And my wife said, wait, you're an ape. You're an author, artist, photographer, philosopher, explorer, entrepreneur. So if you do ape square, figuratively and literally, I'm that descended, our species is from that linealogy of the great apes. So really genetically yet belong to this tree of evolution, and figuratively, obviously, with all the letters. So now I wear many hats, but I think it's kind of a nice story to tell. I have to figure out where to put an S now for a space advocate.
Well, there's that too. That's very important.
There
I'm
we
a
go.
little honest about that. And you've authored a book, Feel the Wild?
Yes, it's a collection of the stories that I've written over the last 10 years. And the stories are more about us, Really, it's not really about nature, but it's about the lessons that nature has and apply to our own journey, my own journey also in the process. When I went from this little boy growing up on the East Coast, having moved 10 times by the age of, I was 12, having to constantly reinvent my world. And nature was this constant. It was this refuge that I created for myself. And along the years, it really taught me about what it is to be human and to live on this planet. And I went on into, funny enough, into business. I went first and tried my luck at being a marine biologist, but that didn't work out. So I pivoted and went into business and figured that at one point I would make enough money to buy a sailboat and sail the world. But life works in different ways. So I ended up in New York. And then at one point in my life, I was forced to reassess how I wanted to carry on my next, 20 years. And this is when I decided to sell everything, go to Argentina and start what I'm doing today, which is write these stories about us and about nature.
So how did you start your journey into becoming a solo explorer?
You get lost. You get lost by admitting and realizing that you're lost, that you're not in the place where you're supposed or where you want to be. And then after that, you take the leap of faith, of basically leaving everything behind, and anything that it's ahead of you is better than what is left behind. And I knew that there were a couple things. I knew that, when I grew up, nature was really important to me. And people seemed to say that I had this connection that was deeper than what you usually can expect. But I took the world map and I put my finger on New York where I was living, and I went as far south as Argentina. I couldn't go any further, and this is where I went. And I found some people that lived in Argentina, so they became kind of a hosting family. And with my marketing background, I was able to come together with a sponsor package, which allowed me to give me the gear and what I needed, and made it down there and kind of made it happen. I went with the flow, and that part of the process of always kind of not having all the details nailed down has become part of my process. That's where I think that magic happens. So everywhere that I go, I make sure that there's a lot to fill the blank, because I can't expect to know everything on those places that I've never been. So I connect with the people, and then they make me go in certain places, and I let myself grow. I purposely put myself into a place of vulnerability and at the dependence of others, so that they can become part of my journey.
One of the things that I really value and appreciate about all of your experiences is this indomitable resilience that you seem to have. I remember reading about you were in a kayak, and the kayak broke apart, and it could have been a critically bad situation, and yet here you are. And I'm curious, with those types of experiences, how does that change your outlook, and how does that broaden your perspective?
There are things that are much bigger than you, and you can't be angry when it doesn't work the first time. I've been extremely fortunate for the people that I've met along the way, for the experience that I've been able to experience, for the fact that I'm healthy, in one piece. And there are these moments that were really on that could have tipped and become extremely, extremely bad or become good, have shown me that there's a certain price for discovery. You push the boundaries, and most of the time it works. And some of the times, well, it simply doesn't work. And you have a sense of the humility comes out of those situations. When the arrogance, your sense of power is taken away by these seemingly kind of simple decisions that you made, where I got onto the water, it was sunny, everything was fine. I got out into the Pacific Ocean, there was a swell, like many other days. But then for some reason in that particular day, it went down the wrong alley. And all these domino effects kind of led me into paddling into the night. And again, even when I was into the night, there were shooting stars, the bioluminescent, and I remember telling myself, wow, like if there's one day, one night to paddle on the ocean, this is the night. And then 2 hours later, I was like fighting for my life. When I found myself back onto the shore, first of all, the wave, there's a wave. I mean, people can read the story on my site or in the book, but there's this massive wave that just came from behind, and I could hear the sound. I could hear the energy. And it felt like this giant monster that was rising from the depth of the ocean. I was like, this is going to be awful. And it fell on me, and it broke my kayak in two, and I managed to come back up. And I just holding, on the kayak and just literally just giving up to the sense of like, this is as far as I go. Not giving up in my life, but giving up and fighting against the ocean. And my feet touched the sand, and I just remember being grateful and not being angry at the ocean, because the ocean is so much bigger than you. There are things that need to be respected and failed on the first or second time, so that you're reminded of those forces. But throughout my life, there's so many times that all the things that were taken away from me, all the things that I had were taken away from me, and you figure your way forward. And one of the things that I always tell myself is that it could always be worse. It could always, if I'm able to think, if I'm able to talk to someone, if I'm able to get up in the morning, well, I have already like a lot in my bag. And then after that, it's just a question of perspective. The world, the world is what we want it to be. And it doesn't take away the struggles. It doesn't, once you've realized that, a lot of it is about perspective, it doesn't mean that every morning you wake up and you go, oh my God, this is amazing. And then all your troubles go, and then it's a rosy walk in the park for the rest of your life. It doesn't mean that. What it means is that you don't let yourself be defined by those moments. You realize that it's like a sky with clouds, and sometimes you have a big black cloud that passes by, and you know that the cloud will pass, and then there will be the blue sky, and they're going to be these fluffy, cute little clouds. And it's okay to be angry in that moment. It's okay, to scream at the sky and saying, why is it that all this is happening at the same time? But you wake up the next day and then you carry on. And I think that's what the human species is. This is what we're good at. We're resilient. We break things, we fix them, we argue, but somehow we're able to pass this knowledge forward. And I wrote this letter, and I'm sure I know you want to talk about it, but I wrote this letter about evolution and Earth, and how the human species has done more in evolution and in discovery than in the last like 250 million years. And if this is not something to be amazed at, then I don't know. Like, I cannot convince people to have a positive opinion of human species, but I can present them all the amazing things that we do. So life is resilient, and I think the human species is the perfect embodiment to life.
I do want to talk about the letter. But I first wanted to ask if there was ever a solo adventure you found yourself on that made you think maybe that was the last time that you were going to put yourself out there, that maybe made you have second thoughts about venturing out again.
I think there's always a moment like that. In every expedition, there's a moment where you start to realize that you're making it difficult for you for, you're really roughing it for what, so that you can create a story, you can get an insight. Have you had enough insight so far? Just, I was up in the glacier 2 weeks ago and, sleeping at -20, waking up and it's like everything is frozen and the batteries are frozen and you just like, but then there's always a moment in that expedition, that magical moment that happens and you go, okay, yes, everything is worth because of that moment. And you cannot separate those moments with the struggles. You cannot separate the tragedies from the aha moment. You cannot separate the suffering from the happiness. They all come in the same bag. It's the same energy. And you need to embrace them both if you want to experience them.
Is there something about the experience where you are anticipating, really taking your safety right up to the edge, that you could be looking at your final moments? Is it, and I don't want to categorize that with thrill seeking, or adrenaline junkie, but is there something in those poignant moments that make you resilient in a way that you then feel okay about seeking out more risky adventures or being more at peace with the risk?
Yeah, it's well, now I was having this conversation with was it Scott Peretzinski, I think, or Ron, one of the other astronauts that I was having a conversation with lately, and this has been one of my I would say a little bit of a struggle with what we're experiencing with COVID. Is I've made a career of learning my own journey with risk and uncertainty, understanding the reactions that I have, but also the difference between fears and danger. Dangers are real. It's something that you can quantify. It's something that you can analyze. It's something that you can quantify. But fears are my own interpretation of it. And those fears are rooted in my own personal story, to my upbringing, to the culture that I live in. So every time there's a side of me that purposely wants to push myself outside of the comfort zone to realize, am I afraid, or am I being like, I'm recognizing something else? I'm not a thrill seeker. Well, like I'm not an adrenaline junkie. I'm more interested in my own journey, discovering these places between fear and danger, realizing, what that fine limit, that fine line between pushing a little bit the boundaries so that you can discover. Because if I sit on my chair and do nothing, well, my success rate of discovery is not going to be pretty high. I need to go out to have these little discoveries, but I cannot push it too much because then it becomes too dangerous. So there's always like a really fine, like it's like a tension that you want to make sure that you, but that's where the resilience comes in. And the more I do it, the more I believe that even though I don't know the situation, I have the tools in my pocket to negotiate with the uncertainty. And this is part of, for me, this is the biggest lesson that I try to give to my mentees and the people that I work with is no one can predict the future. No one can predict what tomorrow will be. No one can predict the jobs or the challenges that I will have. But what we can do is that we can give ourselves the tools to negotiate with what's coming, what's going to come down. If I'm a river rafter guide, and I'm going to teach the people the skills to falls, to capsize. I'm going to tell them you can expect, some rocks and all that kind of stuff. And I cannot tell you that you're never going to flip over. In fact, you're going to flip over. And I want you to flip over because I want you to learn also and become more comfortable into this fun, dynamic, challenging. But if you can go there with the knowledge that you have the tools, then you will kind of enjoy the ride as opposed to start to fear everything and want to go upstream or freaking out the minute that something happens. So I'm not going to lie to you. There are times that I'm fully aware that my life could have taken a total different path. I mean, there are times when I was in Alaska, in a kayak, going around an island, and these currents are coming from everywhere. And if something really bad would happen in those moments, I do have the SOS and an emergency beacon. But going through that and practicing what that mantra that I do, trying to calm myself, just reassures me that I have a certain capacity, I have the tools as an individual, as a human being, to deal with any crap that life is going to throw at me. And there's a certain peace when you realize that.
Are putting the situations of putting yourself in stress and crisis situations repeatedly, and your desire to explore, is one driving the other, or are they just synonymous with each other?
I think they're synonymous. At one point, you start to realize that a lot of it is just kind of a different perspective. I remember being with gauchos in Argentina. They're like the equivalent of cowboys here in the States, and we were in the flooded plain, the flooded marshes of Iberra, where you have snakes, alligators, all kinds of. Every once in a while, you drive by a ranch and you see a horse is dead, the legs up in the air because it's been bitten by a snake. And I remember talking to them and sharing how this was a world of danger where they lived. That every place you put your foot, you didn't know what would come at you. And for them, they were like, "Oh, no te preocupes, todo bien." And for them, that was their world. They didn't see any. That was their comfort zone. But to live in a big city like New York, where the cars are crossing, and at the corner you can look, and everybody's coming that close to being hit by something. That for them, that was dangerous. That was hell. They would never trade their forest of monsters to the one of the city. So it's really what we become used to it. And right now, with COVID, one of the things that we have trouble with is this idea that we have to live with a certain new uncertainty, because we have accepted other kind of uncertainty. We get into our car and we smoke cigarettes, we drink, all kinds of stuff that we do that have a pretty high risk of accident, and yet we choose to do it. But it's our perception of it. So for me, I try to be a little bit more kind of consistent in my application of risk. And I really look, okay, is it really risky, or if I just feel it's risky? So if it's not really that much risky, then try it. It's like food. I reserve the right not to like all the food, but I promise that we'll try everything before I say that I don't like it.
You're more adventurous than I am in that way.
Yeah, well, yeah, I know my wife says that too. Like I will try anything, but then I'm like, listen, their food that like I'm not gonna touch at all. Like I can't stand it. Blue cheese, don't ask me blue cheese.
No, not going there.
Cannot.
It's not.
But I did try it, not for me.
So, as you have these conversations with astronauts,
Yeah.
does it come up about the similarities of perhaps shared experiences, perhaps not shared, where you've deliberately placed yourself in some pretty heavy duty stress and crisis situations, but so do they, especially if they've flown multiple missions. And I'm wondering if you've had the opportunity to have that conversation where you're both kind of exploring how that changes you and grows your horizons.
Well, it definitely. I mean, it's a pretty big commonality that we have. Um, we accept the risk and we choose to go there for the rewards of and for the personal growth, the personal journey, the humility that comes along with it when suddenly you realize that we're just scratching the surface and these experiences just open like a door that is much deeper than just a thrill. That's one of the big differences that I make about adventure and exploration. An adventure is you go for a thrill. It's a thrill-based experience. The explorer seeks to go outside of his comfort zone so that he can grow or can become something other. And for the astronauts that go to space, the investment and everything that they put on the line for that experience, to be reminded of something so small about us, but at the same time so powerful, like that we can't achieve that, and pushing the boundaries of what is possible and what is not possible. I think that there's, if someone speaks to like there's some explorers that I know that like you talk to them and you feel that something is missing, that they have there's a filter that they don't have. And it's really hard for people to relate to that because you clearly understand that they live in a different plane and don't see what the rest of others do. I feel that like I'm in between. I do understand where people are coming from. I'm not a thrill seeker. I'm not a crazy person, but I do understand the necessity to play in that gray zone. So does the astronauts. I mean, I don't believe that the astronauts, to go through the training that they have to do, and all of the logistic and the knowledge and everything, you cannot be a space cowboy and become an astronaut. You have to be extremely rational about why you do it. They are able to bring a story that people can connect more, a more human story than a space cowboy story.
One of the conversations that you and I have had, and I'm sure that you've had with others, and I too within the space community, we trade back and forth, is how do we share with the global population that space isn't a different place. It's simply an extension, a natural extension of our current ecosystem. And trying to cultivate this idea that we're not going somewhere else, we're just growing. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I don't quite think that we are capable of convincing everybody. I was talking to some, even within the astronauts, the overview effect and the interpretation of the experience, going to space is different even amongst the astronauts. Their perception and what they think gives them and what they want to come out of it and give to the world is really different. The world is different for many people, and I cannot expect everyone to see the same things that I see.
Sure.
I can present my arguments. I can present the opportunities. I can present, different perspective. And then after that, I have to let people do their own journeys. And that for me is what I've come up with that allows me to sleep at night. Because for many years, I was attaching myself to really trying to convince people, and their decision to understand or not to understand, I really took it personal, and then creates a lot of anxiety because now you it's as if you want them to be like you, but they come from a different place. They have their own story, and we're a very visceral species. We need to understand things. It says on packs of cigarettes it will kill you. People still smoke until there's an experience for them that they can relate to. We can talk about garbage in the ocean as much as we want to. You and I can spend what time is it? 6 o'clock. We can spend until tomorrow morning talking about the environment and talking about what should do and what should not, we should not do. But the truth of the reality about garbage is that at the end of the day, I take my bag and I put it to the curb, to the streets. That is my relationship that I can feel about. Anything else is conceptual. So when it comes to space or even the environment, I've always said that one of the biggest failures of the environmental movement is that they built all their efforts on moral and concepts, when in reality everybody's trying to put food on the table. And they understand that, the planet is something, but in the end, their priority is to be able to give a chance to their children. So that is real. And you cannot blame people for that. You cannot blame people for trying to put their family first, over the planet. And when it comes to space, what people are afraid, it's not really space, but that space will take away what they don't have or what they demand. So if you can try to connect the dots with them, saying that this will not take away, and in fact, history has proven to us that every time this happens, it actually makes the world better. It's the same, the fact that you can go to the grocery store and get your food gives you the ability to not transform your yard, your backyard into a garden. If you had to grow a garden, if you had to take care of all your food in your house, then you needed to have a farm, you needed to cut the animals, you need to plant all the things. But the fact that you can export or you have these resources that are outside of your place gives you the capacity to turn your house into more of a leisure place. So the humans on this planet, once we figure out, or once we're able to, let's say, mine a different asteroid or a different non-habitable planet, for most of the resources that we need, the planet is definitely going to have a benefit, because now we don't need to harvest from our planet as we used to. We do it in other places. And the more people, the more ideas, the more that's life. And for me, it's going to be really, it's not going to be like without any challenges, but it is definitely going to be fascinating and inspiring. It's a human. First of all, we need to accept the differences of opinion. And these differences of opinions are not new. They've always existed. And one of the conversations that I was having, recently, even if you want to go back to the beginning, let's say that we all agree that we all started from Africa, or, there was at one point this little village. The first person who would decide to look at the mountains or to look at the plains and look behind at the village and said to his parents, you know what? I love you all, but this is calling me and I'm going to go. The village complained, "Why is it that you were leaving us behind?" And he left. I'm, the oldest in my family. I left, my family. I'm the one who like left the nest and started to travel. And there's always this unspoken, um, little truth where like, oh, you're the one who left us behind. So it's this reality of this dialogue of why some are leaving, make others feel like they're being abandoned and they don't, they're not being, and even more so if they're not being recognized and not being heard. So the important thing is just to make sure that they're heard. I think I think that would be the most important thing.
So we had discussed the letter that you're going to share with everyone. Thank you. What was the driving influence? What inspired you to write this?
I believe that there's an arc in life, and it's not just an arc for our species, but the universe has an arc of growth, of expansion. Whether you start from the Big Bang, it expands, and then we talk a lot about how there's going to be more black holes, and then at one point the universe is going to get into this like massive black place where everything now has become silent. So everything has an arc of life. And the planet, and it's not, and I want to be clear on something. I don't humanize the planet, and I don't think that the planet has a sense of awareness in the same way that we have. It's not like the planet wakes up in the morning. I'm not too sure which morning she would wake up because it's always morning somewhere. But it's not like the planet just asks itself those questions. But life has an arc of life. So the planet Earth started really primitively 4.6 billion years, at the beginning of our own universe, galaxy. It was rough and almost with no life, volcanoes, and then it became more complicated. It tried different things. Life was trying different things. And you can almost parallel that arc of life to our own arc, where we start as this cell, this really primitive, and then we learn, and then we're this little baby and we can't say too much, just a couple words. And then we get into a teenager, and then we try things, and then we fail, but we keep moving forward. And then as we get into being older, we understand the complexity, not that we don't understand the complexity, but we start to be more comfortable in the gray zone, and realizing that the world is not black and white, that innovation works also with failures, and that there's a value, and in the end, it's what we do with it. So I took that and I created that arc for the planet, how the planet has a purpose. It wants to become more than what it started. It started something really primitive, and it wants to be more. It wants to connect with other, and the knowledge that it has developed, that others don't have, is life. Life is really the knowledge of the planet. And you look at the other planets, and they don't have that knowledge. So from the perspective of the universe, when you have that knowledge, what do you want to do with it? What do you want to connect it with other sources of knowledge, and you want to export that knowledge? So the planet now is at the stage that for the first time in 4.6 billion years, there's a species that has the capacity to fulfill its purpose of exporting its knowledge, of taking it into the universe and hopefully connect it to other places of knowledge, and creating this mosaic of life on the scale that is obviously so big. But so I talk about the scale, the difference of scales on which the planet lives and we live, and about like 1 minute on Earth time represents like 144 years for the planet, just so that we're just like this little tiny little spot, on that big, incredible network of the universe.
So with that lead in, please,
You want me to read it?
I would love for you to share the letter with us.
All right. Okay. So here hold on. I'm just gonna, there we go. So, a letter from Earth. Now you have to imagine that it's the Earth that's talking. It has come to my attention that in the last 2,000 years, there has been some misunderstanding about your perception of what I am, what is our relationship, and what you are. So, as we enter what will be for me one of my most exciting evolutionary chapters since the disappearance of the dinosaurs. Yes, I'm talking about something that happened 65 million years ago. I want to set the record straight and hopefully remind you of the bigger picture and your role in it. Now, I know that your first reaction will be to deny any of this, but I'm asking you, for the sake of our relationship, to take a moment and read. What I am. Perhaps I can start by telling you what I'm not. And this might come as a surprise, but I'm not something for you to save. I'm not some little fragile entity that needs to be protected. I'm not yours to manage either. I'm not your mother. The fact that you bring me down to a gender proves to me that you have failed in recognizing what I am. I understand you like to bring things to your level so that you can feel better about yourself, but there are things that simply are bigger than you. I know you like to categorize everything because it helps you make sense of the world around you. It gives you a sense of place. It brings you peace when you feel there is structure you can explain. But understand not everything can be categorized. You can't reduce me to a nice little concept that fits neatly into your perception of what is right and what is wrong, what should be and what should not be. A binary way of looking at the world that simply doesn't work. The scale on which I exist and live and the dynamics I deal with are simply out of your realm of comprehension. Just to give you an idea of what we're talking about, you have a rough understanding of my age, 4.5 billion years, and my lifespan, 7.6 billion years. Whether the numbers are correct or not doesn't really matter. The lesson is the same. So, for the sake of the exercise, going along with those numbers, I can tell you that 1 minute of your life, given that you live for 100 years, is the equivalent of 144 years for me. The time you will take to read this page, 6 minutes, represents 864 years of my existence. 1 day in your calendar is 207,360 years in mine. And 1 month is 6,220,800 years. A month ago, on my timeline, your species was emerging. And don't forget, I'm just a speck in a much bigger picture, a picture which timeline is apparently at least 20 times longer than mine. Yes, quite a perspective, you might say. It's okay if you have trouble wrapping your head around it. I too find it difficult to process. I mean, can you make sense of the difference between 20 billion years versus 50 billion? I sure can't. Much like you, I have a goal, and that goal is to become more than what I started with. I want to evolve. I want to spread the knowledge I have acquired over the time to new places. I want a legacy. I want to connect. I want to have a purpose that is beyond me. I mean, who doesn't? Just like your body, which started as a simple cell, a cell that then multiplied, evolved, that then turned into the creature that you are, with an amazing brain, 2 legs and 2 arms, roaming everywhere it can roam. I, too, started as a tiny little thing, billions of years ago. My beginnings were quite primitive. I wasn't the complex entity that I am today. You could think of this chapter in my life as my baby phase. It was a time of profound transformation where I had to tough it up to find ways to protect myself. I will be honest with you, it was pretty brutal. I certainly didn't get to be who I am today because I had it easy. The resiliency I have truly was born out of fire and other tragic and monumental events I had to go through. Now, as time went on, slowly and gradually, and with luck, I added layers of complexity onto my world. I started to experiment. I started to push the boundaries. I started to get out of my comfort zone to see what would happen. Some of my experiments were brilliant, and some others, well, they didn't go too far. For a while, I thought I had to figure it out. I had this one project going. It went on for a very long time, and it was wonderful and beautiful. But also, for some reason, it wasn't going anywhere either. Well, it was, but not in the direction I wanted it to. Then the project kind of ended. It totally collapsed. I mean, everything disappeared. And it wasn't even my fault. You can thank the universe for this one. All that I had built with this was destroyed. I mean, everything. If you want a metaphor, think Steve Jobs being fired from Apple. Yep, that is how I felt. I had spent so much energy and time building something, and out of nowhere, coming from the sky, I lost it all. But I am an entrepreneur, and I wasn't going to let this cataclysmic event bring me down. I looked at what I'd left and started to build on it. Now, remember my goal, what I want my legacy to be about. I want to be the starting point, not the end. I want to connect to others. I want to reach out. I want to find others like me. So how do I achieve that? How do I get through the limits and challenges that were given to me and get to fulfill my dreams? How do I spread the knowledge I have? Well, I keep pushing the boundaries and I keep trying. I keep looking for new ways. And I know that this by itself is designed to create conflict. Now, before you make a judgment, let me remind you that this is exactly the same journey you, your body, and your mind experience, but on a smaller scale. How did you get to be who you are today? Was it a straight line? Did you have any setbacks? Did you fail? Did you make any mistakes? How did you get to develop the skills you have? How did you achieve the impossible? It certainly wasn't by sitting back and letting the world go by. It wasn't either without its share of challenges, struggles, and suffering. You've tried, you've failed, you've tried again, you've learned, you have adapted, you have transformed, then new challenges found you, and the cycle keeps repeating. You keep on trying and failing. Now, before I move on to the next point on my agenda, I need to circle back to the first question. Who am I? I know you like clear answers, so here it is. I'm the planet, of course, and the knowledge I have is life, and life is nature. There's no such thing as life and nature. They're both the same. And my goal is to spread life to places that have no life. I'm not interested in keeping things the way they are, so I'm definitely not a fan of the status quo. I embrace disruptions. In fact, I thrive from them. I do everything I can to create change and force innovation. I want to evolve, and hopefully me and the others, we can create this mosaic of life across the universe. I agree. Not a small endeavor, I can assure you, but one that I am committed to. Earlier, I mentioned one of my projects that lasted for a long time, but then got destroyed. I also said that it wasn't going anywhere. What I meant is that it had reached a plateau, and if the randomness of the universe hadn't reset the clock, well, I'm not even sure we would be here talking to each other. I mean, it's quite extraordinary that the mammals have done more in terms of evolving in the last 65 million years than the dinosaurs did in 200 million years. I don't want to say anything bad about the reptiles. They were amazing, but again, I wanted more. Now, even within the mammals, one species has proven to be extremely resourceful and quite surprising. A bit arrogant from time to time, but still the only one who has risen to the task and is about to help me fulfill my dreams. So yes, this new era we found ourselves is about to be one of my most exciting evolutionary milestones. Which leads me to the next point. Who are you? You're a vessel for something that is much bigger than you. You're a tool for life to expand. You, along with other species, are doing the same as I am doing. In fact, the same as the universe is doing, and what galaxies are doing. We're born, we grow and expand, we slow down and settle. Finally, we reach the end of the journey, only to be recycled into something else and reborn for a new journey. The Big Bang, as you call it, wasn't the beginning of it all. It was only the start of a new chapter in a book that has neither a beginning nor an end. While life gave every organism the same tools for evolution, you somehow, through immense luck, managed to acquire certain skills that allowed you to do quantum leaps in development. Some of those little discoveries were simply born out of a biological and evolutionary purpose, but they evolved and became much more. The consciousness you possess today, while extremely complex and powerful, started like everything else, a simple spark, nothing more. A cell that grew and continues to grow. But as life is built on duality, these new powers came with their own burden. Your sense of awareness allows you to study the past, question the present, and imagine the future. But it also makes you compare and wonder what is missing. Your emotions enhance your journey in ways that are truly magical, but they also offer tragedies, pain, and suffering a way to be expressed. And your remarkable ingenuity either builds or destroys the greatest of castles. And altogether, they set the stage for a complicated journey. Where your lives are rich with discoveries and your capacity to engineer the impossible is truly remarkable, you're still a young and immature species trying to grasp the immensity of the universe and struggling to accept the limited but really important part you play in it. So you create stories to give meaning to life that have no purpose other than to push life forward. That said, for the record, I must share with you how I am amazed at your creativity in creating stories. They are truly incredible and have the power to get you through the unthinkable. But be warned, they also have the capacity to take away everything you have built and destroy all the work you have accomplished. To boldly go. Life is continuously moving forward, boldly going where it hasn't been. And when not in motion, it is because something is holding it, not because it wants to stop. Just like water in a glass, its desire of expanding contained. But take the glass away and the water goes everywhere. Some of it will dry, some of it will nourish certain organisms, and some of it will sneak through cracks and merge with other waters until it finds the ocean. Even there, contained by the Earth's crust, it still moves, trying to find a place to go. So are you. Being an ambassador for life, you're constantly moving forward, looking for new places. And when those places are not reached, it's not because you don't want to, but because you can't. These mountains locked you in until you found a way over or around it. These oceans kept you from going further until you learned to ride them. The sky was of the realm of dreams until you discover how to build wings. For every obstacle, you have found a way to solve them. Propelled by this relentless and internal inner force, you fulfill life's mission with undeniable creativity and resourcefulness. And now, for the first time in billions of years, you're about to leave the nest and embark on a journey like none others, bringing along the knowledge I have given you to new destinations. This is so exciting. Do you know how many other planets have tried and failed? Their numbers are staggering. Now, don't be fooled. Just like everything else before, this new chapter will grow into its own journey of transformation, unveiling with it known and new unimaginable struggles, threats, and pains. My advice, don't think you can avoid them. Just be prepared. They're part of the process. Remember, while you're a species worthy of special recognition, you're also nothing more than one piece in a puzzle made of thousands of other pieces. By itself, you mean nothing. by yourself, you are nothing. It is together that you become something. It is your connection to others and everything else that brings value to your existence. Just like me. If it wasn't for the sun, the moon, Jupiter, the comets, and so many others, I would have nothing to show for. If it wasn't for them, I would be meaningless and would have not been able to nurture life, which means including you. You owe what you are today, not only to them, but to everything else that came before. Your existence is built on the disappearance of past species and failures of past societies. As you venture forward, be grateful and humble. Don't be greedy and righteous. Life uses diversity not only to enrich the experience, but most importantly, to develop the resilience needed in facing the unknown. Remember, it's not about you. It's not about me either. It's about life and its mission to become more than what it was, to evolve and to connect, just like a fungus that stretches on a log on the neurons in your brain. And if you fail in recognizing your place in it, if you mistake your importance for entitlement and treat what is around as slaves to your illusion of being a master, know that there's a future waiting for your failure and disappearance. Now, make me proud and boldly go where no life has been before. Sincerely yours, the planet.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. I think I'm going to change your introduction. I'm going to have to add poet.
All right. And one more P in the equation.
There you go. That's it. So it's like ape, but with a little bit of a speech impediment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what exploration is next for you? I don't want to call
there's still so many places to explore. There's so many places I haven't been on this planet. There's definitely all towards the Arctic Circle, even Antarctica, the remote islands, and playing my part in space exploration. Even if I cannot go there, I can definitely try to be part of that story. I started a VR company where, try to create an experience that people who normally would never be able to come close to it can at least experience a little bit of it. And so I reached out to certain space companies because I want to be able, as we go to the moon or as we go to Mars, to create a VR experience that gives the capacity for people to experience the overview effect or to see the planet from a different perspective. Because that's what traveling is. That's what the overview is. The overview is the latest perspective that we have from where we come from. It started from our little village, and suddenly you're at the top of the mountain and you look where you are and you go, my God, this is it. And then, then we get into the skies and then we start flying and then we look down. It's like, you mean this is my house? This is just like, it looks so different. And then at one point you get into, and the atmosphere, and then you realize, oh my God, this is just a planet. And so in maybe 50,000, or I don't know how many thousand years, we'll be at a new point where we'll look back. It's like this galaxy that we live in, it's this tiny spot and we're going to be at a different place. So that for me, the overview effect is always something that is pushed into these new boundaries that gives us the capacity to look back and go, oh, I never thought that my life that I saw on a horizontal level, looking from above, totally different. So, I did share with you that we also have to be ready that at one point there will be a tipping point that the overview effect of space will not have its weight anymore. It will be the same thing as what people do today. You travel, you get into a plane, you don't even think about what it really was, in those first years of flying, where people couldn't, could not understand what it was. And at one point, we will go to space in the same kind of casual event as like going and flying to a different continent, and we won't be looking at the planet as this little thing. We're just going to be looking at it like, oh, this is just a city I left. So we have to embrace that moment, and we have to communicate the story, but we also have to understand that it will fade away with time.
I do agree with that. When you take these journeys, you are sponsored, are you not?
Yes and no. I've chosen the struggling life or the difficult life of trying to figure out those questions after. I like not to be limited with or to be tied into certain expectations, because I purposely leave a lot of room for the unexpected. So often if I go to a place, I go and I don't know how I'm gonna, when I'm gonna come back. So I go, a lot with the flow. And often either sponsors or publications, magazines, they want to know what's being delivered. And I've chosen a different avenue, which I find people who believe in my work. They believe in the depth of the content and what I'm trying to do, the long-term approach. And, I've been fortunate to find those supporters, and, they show up and then something happens and then I find new ones. But I wouldn't change anything. It's not for the faint of hearts. That, I think the journey of an artist is a really rewarding one, but it's one that you take not because you choose it. You take it because you feel it chose you.
Sure. Well, thank you, Daniel. Thank you for spending time with us today.
Thank you for having me. That was wonderful.
It was a wonderful conversation. Today is one of my favorite conversations. I really enjoy the opportunity to have these conversations with Daniel. I also come away feeling a bit more enlightened and a bit better informed about how the human psyche is a crucial consideration as we take our next steps out into space. I hope that you enjoyed the conversation today, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.